82. In our country, the average age of death is 76. And somebody who is 76 years old, when they were born in the 1940s, 49, the average life expectancy was in the 60s. So they've actually exceeded their life expectancy at birth. The pandemic has not affected U.S. life expectancy, but the lockdowns have. And the lockdowns took off 1.9 years in U.S. life expectancy.
Well, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, it's the highest of any country in the world. And that's the other thing about Tony Fauci. We have the highest deaths of any country. Why does anybody think that's a good track record? We had among the highest ratio of deaths, in other words, deaths per million. We had around, I think 2,000 deaths per million. Well, between 1,500 and 2,000, depending on when you look at it. But there's many countries that had in the double digits. In the Cape, we had 1,000 times more deaths per million than some countries. The countries that were using hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin for malaria, those countries, lost almost nobody. And so why does anybody think that Tony Fauci had this great track record when he literally, America had more deaths than any country in the world?
Yeah, that he should be fired just for that fact alone as compared to Haled. So last thing to talk about, maybe on the bright side. My sense is the resistance is a lot bigger than people think. Because of the censorship and how they don't show things, I think more people are rebelling than maybe they anticipated and that people might think based on looking at the news or looking at the media. In Europe, also, there's been big demonstrations. I think you've actually, were personal witness to some of them and spoke at them. So can you talk about how you're seeing the resistance right now? And is there any ray of light in all this?
Yeah, I'm very heartened about what's happening now in our country, that people are resisting. People are drawing lines. They're saying, no, I talked to a nurse the other day from Santa Barbara, and she is part of a group of she's a leader of one of the groups of about 600 nurses, and who are ready to get fired and about to be fired. And I said to her, I'm not going to advise you to take that route because, I can't do that to somebody. They need to make, their own assessment of risk. And she said, you don't have to talk us into anything. This is the hill we're going to die on. And you have people all over the country saying, this is the hill that we're going to die on, because we know if they push us over this one, that, there's no end to the totalitarian ambitions of this movement, of what's happening now, and they will run us over and plow us under, and we need to say, right now, stop. And that, I've been doing this issue, Patrick, for 17 years, unwillingly, but I've been doing it. And there are many, many celebrities who've come up to me long before COVID, who are talking about the vaccines and sports figures, et cetera, and saying, I agree 100% with you. We need better testing. They're not being tested. We're being lied to. And but most of them won't come out publicly because their careers are destroyed. I never say to them, you need to come out and say that, because it's not my place to tell people to put their livelihoods and their families at risk. And I know what was done to me, and I have tremendous resilience because of my track record with litigation, and because of my long history of environmental advocacy, and because of the power of my friendships and contacts with people. That is much more difficult for them to hurt me, but they have, and they can destroy people who don't have the kind of resources I have. But what I say to people now is, now we got to draw the line. It's time now. Everybody's got to be involved in civil disobedience. If you're not doing 2 or 3 civil disobedience every day, and that could be just talking to a mom who's walking down the street and handing her a card saying, here, before you vaccinate those kids, the COVID vaccine, here's something that you need to know. And we give those cards to people. Those cards are available at CHA. That's an act of civil disobedience. Tell a business owner who posts a sign saying, don't come in here unless you're wearing a mask or vaccinated, saying, I'm going to notify all my friends to not come into this business. And to resist every way that you can, and because the reason people are going along with this is because it's a propaganda tactic. That if you tell people again and again and again, if you have CNN telling people again and again and again, do what you're told or you're going to die, do what you're told because you're going to kill your neighbor, do what you're told, all these lies that you hear from the network who are making tons of money from scaring the hell out of people, they repeat the message again and again, and that works. And what we need to do is start repeating a different message to Americans and saying, don't be scared. Do not be scared of this microbe. Act prudently, build your health, build your immune system, take care of your family, and exercise, sunlight, educate yourself. And before you take a vaccine, make sure that you know all the side effects. Make sure that you know the long-term cost-benefit analysis of that product. And if you don't make it. Don't allow anybody to force you to take something that you don't understand.
Well, I shudder to think of where we might be if you weren't doing the work you were doing, personally and also with Children's Health Defense. Also, congratulations! I know you just finally completed your most recent book, and that had to be an arduous task. What was the final title of the book?
It's called The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Humanity and Democracy. Buy it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or anywhere. Go to your local bookstore, even better.
I pre-ordered it, so I'm looking forward to getting my copy.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time, and just thanks so much for all the work you're doing. It's making a difference.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you.
That concludes my interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. His grasp of the Constitution, of the legality around what's going on right now, and his perspectives on it all are very poignant, very well organized, and every time I listen to him, I learned something important that I take away. There are a lot of great takeaways from that interview. I hope you took notes and that you'll share them with other people. Here comes part 2 of my 3-part interview with Dr. Peter McCullough. If you saw part 1, you know what an extraordinary, gifted individual this is, and thank goodness he's willing to share what he knows and understands with you and I. Part 2 is extraordinary, and there will be a part 3 to follow, but let's do part 2 right now. How'd that go for you, your personal journey in COVID? So you did the protocol, pretty much that you were recommending?
I did the protocol, and I suffered, not to spend too much time on it, I suffered on some confused information where I was very ill in February of 2020, and I made a trip to California. I was under the impression I may have already had it. I was involved in some earlier research in my center where we're using experimental antibody assays where I had some antibody assays that were positive. So I was under the impression that I had it, but the evidence wasn't very strong. And then sure enough, my wife got it, had the close contact. It was clear I got it. At that point in time, I got an FDA-approved test. I had it, and I had all the characteristic features. And I got going on early treatment. It was a bit late, but I almost certainly had some pulmonary involvement. I had shorter breath, and I made a video. I exercised and just to kind of show everybody when one has COVID, you're away from people outside, but if you try to exercise, which is actually not a bad thing to do, as long as one doesn't have a fever, it's actually a good thing to do, how short a breath one can be. Just to show that, I look back, I said, wow, I was really short of breath. And I went through a sequence of drugs involving hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, the nutraceutical supplements, either colchicine or placebo, and then corticosteroids. So a pretty good program. Wasn't hospitalized, my wife wasn't hospitalized, so now we had 3 of my family members have been through it. And I was tightly communicating at that point in time with Senator Johnson. And Senator Johnson strongly believed that this was a time for doctors' judgment, that doctors' judgment was going to be critical to the pandemic response, and that we just could not sit back and wait to be told what to do because no one was telling us what to do. I mean, there was just no guidance. People were getting test results and going home with no guidance and just saying, listen, if you get sick, show up to the hospital. And that was the state of affairs from March of 2020 all the way through to the historic Senate testimony hearings.
Well, let's talk about those. So what happened there?
Well, I have to tell you, I did have a moment in time of understanding what was going on. So I had gotten the letter to show up in the Senate and present. And that letter looks like getting called to jury duty.
Yeah.
And comes on letterhead. It says you will appear, you have 5 minutes, and you must submit a 700-word speech of what you're going to say. It's pretty well circumscribed. I said, I have a critical figure to help America understand about viral replication, cytokine storm, and thrombosis that I've got to show on the Senate floor. I need to do this, but I want to be able to cite it. So I knew the importance of publishing because I'm in this business. This is what I do. So, and not that, but we had data on ivermectin. We had data on monoclonal antibodies coming. We had data on colchicine now, very supported, inhaled budesonide. And these supported by clinical trials, inhaled budesonide, 2 solid randomized trials, corticosteroids, 12 trials. We are extrapolating from in-hospital, stuff that worked in hospital late, surely could be beneficial early, right? And as well as aspirin and anticoagulants. So I had an update to the second paper, but I didn't have time to reach out to all the authors again and get all their opinions, and just this whole collaboration piece is just time consuming. It's a million emails. Everybody has their own, words they want in there. So I said, I'll do this solo. I'll do it as an update, and we'll publish it in the Proceedings of the Baylor University Medical Center, our own journal. I would get internal peer review. Dr. Roberts is the editor. So I submitted it. They got 2 peer reviewers. It came back. Changes requested. I did it. We went through some checks with the deputy editor about overlap with the American Journal of Medicine paper to make sure it didn't overlap too much, because it was clearly an update from the first paper. And got past that, and it got full acceptance by Dr. Roberts. and I was going to go to Taylor and Francis, the journal. So I filled out the contract, publication agreement, paid a fee. The fee, as I recall, is like $3,500. It's not cheap to publish, paid it on my own money. And it's off of Taylor and Francis, ready to get cited in the National Library of Medicine, PubMed, and ready to go. And I'm waiting, because I want the NLM site ID on the figure to show on the Senate floor. And time is coming. Nothing comes. And I'm running out of time. I contact Taylor and Francis. Where is the citation? When is this going to be cited? No answer. And then finally I get an answer from Taylor and Francis. They go, Dr. McCullough, there's a problem with your publication. You have to talk to the editor. I said, good grief, what type of problem? I mean, this is over the finish line. Once we sign publication contracts, peer review is already done.
Yeah.
Everything, all the checks are done. I mean, this is a done deal. It's actually contractually done. So I go down to Dr. Roberts' office, and he goes, it's the first time I've seen this in my 50 years of editing. I said, what? I said, the National Library of Medicine pulled this out and said the paper can't be published. I said, why? He said, too much overlap with the first paper. I said, we've already been through that. I already went through the checks. Sorry, he goes, I've never seen it, but it can't go forward. I said, good grief. So I went to the U.S. Senate without having the NLM site ID. I had an original date of issue from Baylor proceedings, and I just had to go with that. And I went forward with the Senate testimony to finish the story on the paper. I felt like, wow, things are starting to really work against publishing any information on early treatment. So not only was my paper in the American Journal of Medicine pretty lonely, there were no other protocols. We didn't see a Harvard protocol or Mayo protocol or protocol from Karolinska. We didn't see any protocols from Italy. There were no protocols. No one was publishing different protocols. You can imagine if this was a cancer, there'd be 17 different protocols. Everyone would be pouting that they've come with an approach. All of our U.S. medical centers would be so proud to say that they are saving Americans from being hospitalized. That it was not.
Is your interpretation it's not for lack of people trying, but that they're not allowing it to get published?
Well, again, to my knowledge, I don't think these medical centers even tried any protocols.
Well, okay.
Because none were listed by the clinicaltrials.gov. So not only did we didn't see any papers, we didn't see any people out there saying, yes, so-and-so, come to the Mayo Clinic and you'll be one of 3 of our outpatient protocols to keep you from being hospitalized. We didn't see this anywhere. You probably don't remember any being advertised.
Yeah.
Nothing was offered to Americans from our major medical centers, which is really shocking. Now, our major medical centers offer something to everybody. They have programs for every illness under the sun, but suddenly for this one, it was just a complete lack of academic effort.
Yeah.
So I even felt more implored. I said, geez, if I'm the only one who can get a paper published on how to treat COVID-19, the update's super important because we had the emergency use authorized antibodies. These were as good as we're going to get. They were the first FDA-approved new technology to treat COVID-19. New technology, first one. So what I did is to finish the story in the paper, I recruited. I said, you know what, maybe I'm just taking too much on my own shoulders. I reached out to the doctors who were treating COVID-19 with all their innovations. So you know what, I want your opinions. Dr. Vladimir Zelenko, he was one of the original innovators. I didn't have a relationship with Dr. Rial, so I didn't reach out to him. But many others, Brian Tyson, George Fareed, I can go down the list, Yvette Lozano, Stella Manuel. They were just all these, now they're the kind of iconic hero figures treating COVID-19, and asked for their opinions. I recognize many of them weren't hardcore academicians, but I had others that were really, I had Dr. Charles Geyer, who was down at Texas Medical Center down in Houston, wonderful academician. I had just terrific academic input, made even a better paper. And then I started to feel as if I was getting worried that I actually could not get this published. I started to get a sense that I couldn't get a fair deal. So I commissioned a separate COVID dedicated issue to reviews in cardiovascular medicine, and I convinced the acting deputy editors that this is important. They had to be funded by the journal, and then invited not only this paper, but a whole array of papers on COVID-19, but largely how COVID influenced the heart. But this had a separate editor assigned to it. That editor had free hand in assigning its own reviewers. Many reviewers were assigned to it. It was heavily peer-reviewed, tons of comments, a big, long rebuttal letter to handle all the comments. I mean, this is the vetting process that it goes through. And that paper was published in the December issue 2020 in Reviews in Cardiovascular Medicine with the update. And to this day, those 2 papers become really bedrock foundation for protocols. In fact, the first paper became the protocol that the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons utilized for the first home treatment guide.
Wow.
Dr. Lee Vliet and Dr. Jane Orient published that. And I helped oversee it to make sure it was accurate, that we had the doses and drugs right. That document was downloaded countless times and utilized probably enormously past from person to person to actually, so Americans could start to know what drugs could they use as an outpatient. The second paper now really had terrific. It had the monoclonal antibodies up front. It had the use of hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, and then outside the United States, we had 5 countries already using favipiravir, an oral drug. Moved into inhaled budesonide, oral prednisone as an example, colchicine, and then down to aspirin and the anticoagulant. So it was basically the full suite of drugs that we use today. So that went on, and I was gearing up. I was recovering from COVID, but I was gearing up for the first set of Senate hearings. And the decision was, we were worried. We actually had already had some activities. I told you about YouTube videos and things being scrubbed and having some conference calls being hacked and Zooms and things not going well. So we had decided, we're not going to do it by Zoom. We're going to go there in person. So I flew, first time I had flown since the pandemic, I believe. I flew from Dallas to Washington. Harvey Rich came from Yale. He drove down with his wife, and George Freed flew in from Southern California. So we flew in, and we were the witnesses for the majority, which is chaired by Senator Ron Johnson. The minority, Gary Peters, chose an academic physician from the Northeast to present, in a sense, a counter-argument. And in that hearing, Gary Peters did say that, he's warning Americans about misinformation. So we were already kind of put on cue that, well, wait a minute, as we try to cite the literature and what the evidence, what we know, that it's possible whatever was said there could be construed as misinformation. But so here we go. Who decides, right? So we made our case that patients should be treated with sequential multi-drug. We had great data on hydroxychloroquine. The counter-argument was largely, you don't have enough evidence. You don't have enough evidence. In fact, it was really what was held in the counter-argument was the only evidence that we're ever really going to have are from large, high-quality randomized trials. We're talking 30,000, 40,000 patient clinical trials, and those only exist with the vaccines. And in fact, the vaccines, and this was November 19th, this is before, obviously, the vaccines were brought forward.